Hey, it's great to see you guys. Thanks so much for coming. And we're streaming live on Facebook. It's wonderful to see everybody. I'm Deborah King, and today we're addressing the infamous, it's really infamous, isn't it, Michael Jackson story in the Neverland documentary. So just want to say hello to all of you who've joined the call. I see lots of people today, and I know it's because it's such an incredibly important topic. So let me just start off by telling you my own reaction, and then I'd like to hear yours. I was anxious to see it, and for me it took 2 evenings because it's so intense. Good heavens, it's about 4 hour long and a couple hours each. And then I followed it immediately, and I urge you to do the same, to watch the Oprah interview that follows of the two young men that are the subject of the documentary. I think the best way to look at it is, I'm as big a fan of Michael Jackson's work as you probably are. The best way to look at it is the documentary is really about the two young men and not per se about Michael. He's a major part of it, of course, but really the story is about them and what happened to them at his hands. And, you know, watching the documentary really brought back so many experiences of my own, as it does for anyone who's a survivor of any kind of sexual assault. It really brings it back to them and triggers the heck out of them. It's completely normal. And by the way, very healing. I want you to know that's one of the main ways you can heal, is by not reliving, but rethinking and reprocessing something that is still in you, in your psyche, and in your energy field. So, you know, I've been doing this for more years than I, can count, and I've worked with thousands, literally thousands of survivors, and I know that it's never really over. You're always still reprocessing it, learning from it. It's not your story, but it's definitely part of your story. It's part of you. And when I watched the documentary, I realized something I don't think I really had thought about before, that when this happens to you and you're a child, as these two young men were and as I was, you have just experienced the most profound kind of brainwashing I think you can get, at the hands of usually someone you adore. As these boys did, they loved Michael Jackson. You can see it in the documentary. I mean, you can see their love is still there for him. My own case, it was my dad, and I adored him. He adored me, but he definitely had this twist. Hold on just a second. We're getting some background noise here. And if somebody's here that needs to mute themselves, if you would, it really helps to manage the call. So it's that brainwashing that is so intense that the rest of your life you're still dealing with it, because it's just so confusing to you. This all-consuming love that the adult feels for you and that you feel for him or her. An adult you trust implicitly until you are betrayed. You were either betrayed, as these two young men were when they got dropped by Michael for another newer, cuter, younger kid. And you saw how sad they were, how bereft, how lost, how they had wrapped their whole lives around him as he had demanded. Because he demanded a complete allegiance. He started to groom them. Of course, as they mentioned, they were groomed years before they ever met him in person. That's why he chose them, because they were like little Michaels. It was amazing, wasn't it, how well they could dance and imitate him, and they were crazy about him. They were, this deep love, it gets very twisted by the adult, by the pedophile, and the adult, of course, has this very twisted mentality of their own. There's no doubt that Michael Jackson was abused. None. I would point to his family and their staunch denials of how he could abuse, because none of them want to face what went on at home, for sure. Because he who knows how many children it happened to in his family, but certainly to him. And then there's the whole resentment against the mother thing. which these two boys will deal with for the rest of their lives. These two really astonishingly, I thought, together young men. I mean, weren't you impressed by them through such tragedy? They were still trying to make lemonade out of those lemons, right? But carrying that secret for so long, they carry it, and then it finally explodes. Of course, their lives just don't make sense to them anymore. Children who have this in their history are often suicidal. They're often using drugs and alcohol to cope, the standard coping mechanisms that are allowed societally. Your life just doesn't pan out. It doesn't seem to make any sense until you put this out of you. And the way to put it out of you is exactly what they're doing. They are taking the elephant in the living room and talking about it. They're just talking about it. And there's no sense in looking for some dark motive like money, because as the one guy mentioned, he said, well, why did I sue back in 2014? Well, because isn't that the route we offer people who've had this happen to them? We don't go out and shoot people who sexually abuse us. The law is our only real remedy, really. So, that's the remedy they tried. And I think this documentary is a much more effective remedy for them, and a much more effective remedy for us as those who need to be taught. And our whole culture needs teaching on this subject. This is, as Oprah pointed out, an insidious, pervasive problem. And, forget the statistics of 1 in every 6 men and 1 in every 3 women. I had a private practice for 30 years, and just about everybody who walked through my door was either a survivor or a perpetrator. I worked with a lot of them too, a lot of Michaels. And I can assure you the problem is much more pervasive than the stats, because nobody wants to report it. I never did, bet you didn't either. And so there are lots and lots of people who don't report. So my guess is it's much, much higher. I always thought for women, it was certainly 2 out of 3. That every 2 out of every 3 women, by the time they're 21 years old, have had some kind of sexual aggression, unwanted, unrequested, and aggressive. And for men, it's probably 1 in 3. So at the end of the day, this documentary and Oprah's interview have shed a great deal of new light on an old problem that I've been trying to bring attention to for more than 25 or 30 years. So I was really excited to see it. I found it disturbing, of course, as I'm sure you did too. And if it didn't happen to you or your loved ones, be assured it's somewhere down the street, or in your cousin's house, or someplace close by. Because what happens is the individual, the Michael, wakes up in adulthood, usually around 18 or thereabouts, and suddenly realizes that he or she has this, what has been taught societally, an unnatural longing for sexual closeness with children. And, society's like, no. So they hide it, and they don't know where it comes from. They're very ashamed by it. Well, it came from the fact that happened to them when they were a child. It is definitely passed down, definitely. It's usually repressed, usually not conscious. So then they're an adult and they're working through this, and they either work through it or they succumb to it. So it's wonderful to bring this elephant right up for everybody to look at and talk about. And I saw a lot of you joined me on my Facebook page to discuss it here since I brought it up late last week, and I know a lot of you have joined me here on the call today. So with that introduction, let's go to Linda Richards. Hi, Linda. You're from Canada.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi. And what are your thoughts on this topic?
I am grateful that it has come to light and that these boys are speaking up, and hopefully more people will speak up. It definitely runs in the family. It will keep going, spiraling. For me, it was me and then my daughter. And it took me, I'm just starting to deal with it now. And it's always been in my closet. I believe that the people that abuse me, I believe were abused themselves. My father was a child when his mother passed away, and I'm sure he was abused and treated abusively. I think Oprah did an awesome job, which she always does.
This was particularly awesome.
Yes, it was. It
Mhm.
was. And I really hope that, that there can be some treatment where, people start reaching out and, and staying in their bodies and, finding out what the signs are, what to look for with our children if they're being abused, and instead of closing our eyes and not seeing what's going on,
As
facing.
as these mothers did.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and one of the points that was brought out in the documentary that I thought was so telling was the and Oprah, of course, pushes the seductive element. She always wants to make sure you're aware that it's preceded by grooming and it's very seductive. But I thought
And
the fact that mothers had been so groomed and
as well.
seduced, I felt so sorry for them.
Yeah.
I did.
And I think that's what
Really
I think that's
sad.
what perpetrators do, is they groom the parents
Yeah.
first and get their trust and whatnot, and then they're able to do whatever with the siblings, with
Yeah,
the
and then
children.
another thing I really personally resonated with was the anti-parent grooming that went on with the child, because I must have received a great deal of that, because I had the world's worst relationship with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my father always saying to me, it's just the two of us, don't pay any attention to her, making her an outsider so that, I didn't like her. And of course, then she didn't like me. But, as an adult now, I know more and I realize that I was being groomed.
Yeah.
In that regard, yeah. The us against her mentality. Well, thanks for contributing, Linda. And anybody who wants to chat about this, just raise your hand and we'll bring you up here on the panel. We'll call on you if you're an attendee here and you want to be heard. And you can have a different viewpoint. This is a very open forum, not pushing anybody's particular viewpoint except my own. But that's the advantage of being my show. But you're welcome to have a different viewpoint from mine. I always welcome that. I'm anxious to hear your thoughts. So Nancy, how about you?
Wow, Deborah, first, thank you for opening this up even more and getting the attention on it. It's so important. I'm thinking back to the doc. I thought it was just so well done, the documentary, and Oprah's interview on it. I remember, I think it was Wade, the taller guy, said, when you're a child, your world is this big. And Michael was his whole world. Michael was everything. And even to the point of having rings and having almost like a marriage ceremony. It's like, I'm yours and you're mine, and it's us, we're in this together. So when he lost that, it's like, who am I? I don't have anything. So you can see he's been trying to rebuild his life, and he goes to the psychologist, and he said, why did it feel good when he touched me? He touched my genitals, because I mean, he's a kid.
Let's stop and talk about a couple of these things, because you've raised some really important things. Number one, every adult feels terribly guilty about that, and no one wants to ever talk about it. Okay, it's like, oh, I'm definitely not going to address that. But of course it does feel good. And here's a person that you adore, that in your eyes is godlike. That's the thing that they didn't mention in the documentary, but I want you to reflect on that. This adult, uncle, aunt, whoever it is, celebrity, whoever it is godlike to you in your eyes at this young age. Anything really under, let's say, 16. And even a teenager can be very susceptible and vulnerable. But these little children, this is God. And so I remember when it was the Catholic priest, and this was number 2 for me, another God representative, just like my father. Well, next one was the priest. And so, of course, you're very confused. Yeah, it's very confusing. And then you raised another important point, Nancy. What was it? Just a second.
Well, the thing about the touching, feeling good, and well, let's see, I wanted to talk about how when he had a son, when Wade had a son,
Oh, that was interesting.
he's looking at this little boy and he think, oh my God, that was me. And I
Right.
could see him reconnecting his younger self to himself now, because he said even when he was watching the documentary himself, this was on Oprah show, there were several times he left his body because it was just, he's like, oh, that's me up there. That happened to me. And he was trying to reintegrate what really happened with the adult male that he is now. What a good piece of work he's doing.
As a survivor, I was so impressed because I could not have done what they did. I don't know about the rest of you, if there's any survivors here on the panel. Are there any besides Linda? No, maybe. I got to tell you, I'm pretty brave, but I don't think I'm that brave to be that frank. Could you, Linda? I don't think I could do it. I've always hedged and never wanted to get too graphic. It's so hard to do because there's such incredible shame still buried in you. Mm-hmm. It's the shame of the perpetrator that's been really dumped in your energy field, not to mention your body. But yeah, so hard to do. My goodness. Such bravery. I'm so impressed with these young men. Yeah. I'm so worried about, is Wade the guy on the right of the screen?
He's the taller one. He's the one that's further along in his healing.
Okay, the other guy. I'm worried about the other guy. What's the other guy's name? James? No.
Me? Robert?
James.
No, it's James.
James.
It is James, yeah.
He looked extremely fragile in his recovery. I mean, I've helped a lot of people along this road, and I would put him at the very beginning. And he admitted it. He said, listen, I just came to this because I saw Wade.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I realized that's me. And I could see his fragility. I was just like on pins and needles the whole time, such a nervous wreck watching him and thinking, oh, God, I hope you're getting lots of help because, dude.
Especially after this has been out.
Oh, especially after this thing. You know, he'll get hate mail. I got a fair amount for simply saying, watch the documentary.
Suicide rate here. It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, I also got just to reflect on myself for a moment. I got completely well, yeah, but I meant when I came out in the way they are, my whole family just has forever ditched me. I'm like not. I have no family. I have no family. So yeah, you give up a lot to stand in your truth. You give up a lot. Yeah, thanks, Nancy.
Sure. I just have one more thing I want to mention. Several people are saying they can't seem to separate the fact that Michael was a musical genius. He contributed so much to the culture, and he was a predator too.
Well, that's their problem.
I mean, he could be both.
Of course.
I think he's both.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, no, there's no, we're not talking about his artistry, his musical genius. That's an established, it's a gift. It's an incredible gift. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Nancy. All right, Mindy. Next.
Yeah, this really is a master class in Truth Heals. These guys are so brave to come forward and take on the machine that is Michael Jackson's celebrity and everything that goes along with that.
Can you imagine?
No, because I think it's hard enough when it's, a family member or a neighbor or this guy, this is Michael Jackson, but that's what makes it a particularly strong opportunity for learning for all of us.
Yeah, well, let's all hold our breath and see if they sue him for slander. Yeah, well, I think they're threatening the network, right? But for, the truth is the defense. And, the other couple of young men or boys, I guess they were children, who sued unsuccessfully will certainly stand up at this point. Mm-hmm. We'd be talking about a civil action. So if you'll think back, there were two, well, let's see, the second one was a criminal action. Was the first one also a criminal action against Michael Jackson? Anybody here know? I was living really close to Neverland for the second one. And I remember being very puzzled at my reaction. I realized still that, this is 20 years ago, I realized that even 20 years ago, I was still so closely aligned and brainwashed still by my father that when Michael Jackson was exonerated I felt relief for him. Now, just think about that for a minute.
Mhm.
That is a very confusing statement to make.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he just lived down the street, and I watched the trial. If you'll recall, I think it was on TV, because I remember dropping everything and watching it for a number of days. That's the one where he went out and jumped on the car, spoke to the crowd. It's very hard to prove beyond a preponderance of a doubt the guilt in a criminal matter, not so much in a civil matter. So that was the state of California, county of Santa Barbara, trying to convict him. And they didn't succeed. But it's because it's so difficult to prove, so difficult. And then their key witness, Wade, lied,
Yeah.
protected Michael, which I really understood. I really, really understood that.
Yeah, he said to Oprah, I just wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I just couldn't go there.
I totally got it. I'm a lot older than he is, and I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it. So I really get this. Anything else you want to say, Mindy?
No, I just thought it was really interesting when he, was walking into the courtroom during when he was exonerated, and he was so sick and pale, and
Terrible.
he was like about to face, the
jurors.
Pay the price, and he got off, and then he's dancing on the car, and
Right.
It just
Do you remember what happened the 2 days before? Because it's all coming back to me now. I did watch this thing pretty avidly. He refused to come in. He had his spokespeople and his attorney say he was too ill to come, and the judge said, "I'm going to hold you in contempt and put you in jail if you don't come." And he came the next day in his pajamas.
That's
I
right.
still remember that. Talk about an oral characterology. So let's just talk characterology for a minute. He's an oral psychopath, Michael, and went into oral. Oh, poor me. I'm a victim. Oh, he was screaming victim, victim all the way to the courthouse steps. But in fact, he's really a predator, pedophile, psychopath in terms of characterology. He was hiding it.
Hiding.
Psychopaths are great actors. They're great performers. They're great
Singers, evidently.
showmen.
Yeah.
I don't think he was clean either, like without drugs since he was a young person. So he likely wasn't even himself.
Oh, you're saying he wasn't clean?
Yeah, he wasn't.
Well,
clean.
Michael wasn't clean since the Pepsi commercial. How old was he then? That's when poor guy, I always felt sorry for him, got hooked on sorry, I've forgotten the name of that drug that he died from an overdose. And he was they didn't mention the Pepsi commercial in the documentary, but Michael was pretty young.
Yeah.
So it was quite a while before the trial, but Mindy's right. He just became almost a shadow of himself because of guilt and the fear of being found out. There's tremendous fear of being found out here. And remember, this is passed down. You also want to see the light here. This tragedy was passed down to Michael by his family. This is in his DNA. Somebody in the family, I won't name any names, but it's pretty obvious to me what was going on. He was physically abused by his dad.
Yeah.
You know that, right? Everybody knows that.
Yeah, he was whipped so he could be the top performer.
Right.
Yeah.
So just, use your imagination. Really sad case. Sad all the way around. So you do ask yourself, why would someone who loves his music as much as we all do, admired him as a performer as much as we all do, why would you not see the whole man with his failings? I never counsel anybody to stick their head in the sand about anything, especially not this. Oh yeah, no, we have to accept the whole person with all of his foibles. Kathy, I see Kathy here. Kathy, what are your thoughts? Thank you, Nancy. What are your thoughts?
It kind of hit home a little bit to me, not because I was abused, but because I have a son who started performing when he was 7.
No.
You know, it wasn't when I started watching it, I didn't know, I hadn't followed it. I didn't remember very much. And it wasn't about who was right and who was wrong or who was lying and telling the truth. I mean, as energy healers, we should all be able to feel it. And it just felt, you know, our hearts were aching as we watched it. And I felt the same for their parents. And maybe because I could identify in a way a little bit as a mom with a child actor. You know, my son was in film since he was 7, and it was never because for him to be famous. It was just, he wasn't a sports kid or an athlete, and that was just his thing. And which was different from the norm of all the other kids. So we kind of went our own way. And I remember when people would just say how wonderful he is and, oh, he's like, you know, Jack Nicholson or Glenn Close and all the things that they would say. It made me feel good because I just wanted him to be happy and supported and succeed. So I can see how those parents kind of mistook everything with Michael. And I went from compassion and then really angry to that village of people that's around him, the ones that were making all the reservations. I mean, well, all the people in his entourage that set up his schedule and reserved the hotel rooms. I mean,
Yeah, but we saw that with Bill
Bill Cosby.
Cosby, of course. It's the same thing. The enablers, you know, that are on the take, that are rewarded for their, you know,
Right.
Yeah, they won't say anything, won't see anything, pretend nothing's happening deal, and get compensated for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of that here. But when you see the videos of them, they're such helpless, beautiful little children.
Yeah.
It's disgusting, really. Yeah, so show moms, as Kathy just mentioned, show moms should all be really alerted by this.
Really alerted.
And be asking themselves, you know, whether my child's in gymnastics, we saw a whole lot of that last year, the gymnastic scandal, or my child is going to Sunday school. Well, we see a whole lot of that in the churches, right? I mean, I'm not a parent, but my God, I'd be afraid, frankly, to let my child out of my sight.
And in that industry, they are out of your sight a lot.
Yes.
You know, they are.
Well, and they are in sports too.
Yeah.
You know, they're back in the locker room and out, you know, and on the field trip. And parents, be alert. It would be really alerted by this documentary.
Yeah. Had I seen this, I mean, I imagine it's going to change and help a lot of people. Look, there's all these kids who are just starting this career or this in this field, and hopefully there's a lot. These 2 guys just were phenomenal at bringing awareness to them.
These mothers were not unlikable or unreasonable people until they were like, oh yeah, leave my kid here for a week, no sweat. I mean, yeah, fly me on a private jet somewhere else and send me in a motorhome to wherever. That's pretty unforgivable. And I loved the boys' response. I thought, wow, they could come over here and teach these young men when they said, oh, it's a path. Forgiveness is a path. I'm on it. That's the most they would say. And I thought, how sincere and honest is that? Because you'll be on it your whole lives and you may still be on the journey, never there. There is no there when it comes to this kind of forgiveness. There's no there. Who wants to be next? Karen. Hi, Karen. What are your thoughts about this? And we could take more people on the panel, by the way. Just hold up your hand and we'll bring you on.
So the part that hit me the most was actually when they started talking about guilt on the Oprah show. So it brought up, you know, volumes of stuff from my past. I got married to a man who was 13 years older than I was at the age of when I was 18. And it started like a 5-year cycle of abuse. And the guilt is predominantly what kept me there. And it shows like a mastery, but you've also highlighted it in this conversation that Michael had guilt and all sorts of things stemming from his past. And now he's using that as like a tool, so to speak, in guilting these boys. And they don't even know how to necessarily see out. Like everything surrounding them is their own guilt. So they don't even know how to come out of that. And that's why I'm so astounded that they were able to get, you know, up on that stage with Oprah and share their truth with the world, knowing how guilty it feels to have even been a part of that.
Well, they'll
Even-
never get over the guilt, because the adult makes sure the child knows that what we're doing is wrong. We can't have fill in the blank, mother, aunt, teacher, whomever, no. So the child picks up on this. I don't care if you're 3 years old, you know that there's something really, it's wonderful, but there's something really wrong with it, and I'm never allowed to tell anybody about it, or he and I will both die. That's the classic one, really classic. And so, you know, they're going to deal with that their whole lives. I'm not sure you ever fully walk on that one. Or you ever fully walk. I was just, again, you know, if I can't do what you're doing, I'm pretty impressed. I was pretty impressed by these guys, because you know how open I am, but that would have been very hard. It's easier for them, of course, and I think they mentioned this. It was easier because Michael was dead and gone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I didn't say a thing until my father was dead and gone. Yeah. Not a thing. Mm-hmm. Mom. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then it was just like it exploded the moment he was gone. And I think that's really common. Mm-hmm. That been your experience, Linda? You're nodding pretty hard.
Yes, that was my experience. And also the you're going to die, because he used the death of my mother to keep me. And then I had I had 2 children that died. And, you know, it was, you know, it was something that held over my head until, you know, about a year ago. So it takes a long time.
You've had a huge, you've been on an enormous healing path, one of the biggest I've ever seen, coming from one of the darkest, you know, places. So, you know, good for you.
Thanks, Deborah.
Yeah, keep up the good work. It's hard. You're dealing with a little bit of, it feels like to me though, you got a little bit of SAD disorder, a little bit of seasonal affective disorder. Is that what I'm picking up from you? I think so.
I think it's working through some of the stuff that I've been working through, along with the coldness and not being able to get out. And it's really cold here. It's starting to warm up, but
you're coming in what, 10 days to Ojai, or 15?
I am. I'm there. My body's there already.
Yeah, I saw you on Facebook just a minute ago, and thought, oh, Linda's she's on her way.
Yeah, I'm on my way.
Yeah, and just so people know what we're talking about, I have a high-level teaching program where I actually meet with people personally. It's called Level 4 and 5, and some of these folks are on it. And we meet fairly often, and we're meeting in Ojai, at the Ojai Valley Inn. Oh my God, a fabulous 5-star here in just a couple of weeks for pretty much it'll take pretty much a week. So we're just sort of like getting warmed up for it. We're all getting very steamed up here. It should be phenomenal.
Deborah, I had another quick thought about
guilt.
Guilt.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Following on what Karen said about guilt, I'm thinking of the James on the Oprah show. He was saying that just before like a day or two before he came on the Oprah show, he felt guilty for a moment because he was betraying Michael, even though Michael's gone. Right. So there's definitely still a connection there. I agree with you that I'm worried about him.
Well, it's never really over, the guilt part. Yeah.
Well, I think Oprah pointed out that he kept talking about Michael as if he was in the present. You know, Michael does this, Michael does that. I remember. And he asked the filmmaker if the filmmaker noticed that too. So he's still really in it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's very fragile. Just on the first baby steps of recovery.
Yeah, but that loyalty that was so interesting, because that's a sign of how well groomed he was. I mean, even after all this has happened and he knows it was wrong, he still can't totally let go of that.
I don't think the grooming ever completely leaves. I just have one more thought here. Hold on. Let's talk about the filmmaker, because kudos to him. This is his masterful thing. And I loved when Oprah said, well, you know, what are you doing this for? And he goes, well, it isn't about Michael. This is about these 2 young men and their process. And I thought I was blown away by his presence and how well he had allowed these film subjects to tell their stories without injecting himself into it. He was not part of the picture at all.
He wasn't an ego at all, Deborah.
Mm-mm. Yeah, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Hey, Deborah Larson.
Hey, hi.
Hey, now let's hear from you.
So yeah, thanks for bringing light to this subject. It's something that I don't know a lot about or have never really been connected with during my life. But I have to say that when you brought this up, my instant reaction was sadness and disgust all at the same time. And much about like what you already talked about, you know, sadness that the people that were around Michael were enabling him, and sadness that they didn't help him, that they didn't say, hey, look, this is wrong, you need help, and took those kids and talked to their moms and said, hey, look, you know, this isn't right. And then discussed all at the same time, like, why didn't people stop this? Why didn't people see this? To me, I'm not a mom, but if I was, I think that would be one of my biggest fears. I was in sports growing up. I did spend nights at my friend's house. I did spend weeks with my coach and other students of hers, and nothing like that ever happened. But I'm thinking, okay, so where's that line with a lot of topics right now? Where's that line between when we take it too far and hold on to our children that they don't have any freedom, and where we give them so much freedom that we're like, oh, well, we're going to go have fun here, and you know, they're being whisked off and having fun over here. Where's that line?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very tricky terrain for parents.
Yeah,
I felt so sorry for these parents on this documentary, because what a difficult walk to walk. I mean, really, imagine the power and force of that kind of celebrity on you.
Yeah.
And he's very convincing, convincing you that he's your friend. I mean, he befriended those parents.
Yeah, and wrapped up in this shiny object syndrome, right? You know, so wrapped up in that.
He called him, and he just really moved in and fooled them, really manipulated the parents.
Yeah.
No, he was a masterful manipulator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think the other part of that, and this was all instant as soon as I saw your post, was the disgust that I had and the sadness. And then as being a healer, like how do I myself put myself in the situation to be able to help somebody like that if that is to come up? When those feelings came up with me, I was like, I didn't know what to do with that, and I was so out of touch with it, I guess. So, anyways, those were just the things that happened.
And for those of us again who have survived incidences like these, you're major triggered by this documentary. You really are. And so a lot of the things that I've wrote about in my book Truth Heals, and then again in probably my next book, and that's very cathartic, by the way. Write your story, it really is. And then talked about it on a couple hundred TV shows and radio shows. I have in many ways moved it out of myself, but this documentary, stirred it up quite a bit and reminded me of a few key moments, like the time I finally decided to tell my mother, which took one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I still remember, and I wanted to do it in person. And so we're walking, and I finally dropped this bomb, and she didn't even pause. She turned, looked at me stricken, and said, "That's impossible." I didn't say who it was. I just said, this is what happened. And she goes, "That's impossible. I never left you alone for a moment, not even with your father." I thought, boy, that's a revealing answer. I didn't know what to say. So I think I said nothing at that very moment in time. I thought, God, yeah, you do know. And they know. They know. There's no doubt about it. You remember. For those of us who remember, not everyone remembers, by the way. Not everyone remembers. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but I actually have pretty clear recollection. Want to hear from Ardell. I see Ardell just joined us. Ardell, I'm calling on you with your enormous career as a counselor of children. What are your thoughts? Teenagers, right? Let me unmute you. You're muted. Let me unmute you there.
I worked with both children and teenagers.
Uh-huh. Well, you have a very informed viewpoint then.
When children and young people are traumatized, one of the things that I saw consistently was that they get stuck developmentally.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they're conscious of the abuse or not, coping with life can become quite overwhelming. And often I'd get involved because they weren't coping. They had become harmfully involved with everything from drugs and alcohol to sex to violence to self-harm. And when you were mentioning about the second young man,
James.
it sounds his vulnerabilities will be considerable if he hasn't had some fairly in-depth help.
And I'm not sure he has. It wasn't apparent.
No, it didn't sound that way. That they are at great risk.
Yes, absolutely.
And it pays no matter what age the victim is here. I hesitate to always call them victim because
You don't want to disempower them.
yeah, exactly. Just to be very vigilant, that's the word I'm looking for, as to challenges they encounter and what resources they have to deal with it.
Uh-huh.
They may not be ready to disclose for a very long time or even forever.
Or forever. Or forever. And I want to, I'm so glad you brought that up, Ardell. It's so important to know that if you go into the helping field where you work with individuals, and I've worked literally with thousands, here's a couple of things to really remember. One, no matter how much you're convinced someone has been subjected to some kind of abuse, any kind of abuse, you do not bring it up, ever,
That's right.
ever. You allow them to bring it up and you help them with it if they do. But you keep it to yourself if that's your observation. All you'll do is traumatize them worse and drive it deeper. So you never, ever launch that remark to a client or whoever it is you believe you're working with. It's inappropriate. You could be wrong, but more importantly, you will just drive it deeper, because if they were ready to talk about it, they would.
Yep.
And my experience is people will always say something to me like, I suspect. They'll start the sentence with "I suspect" or "Do you think?" That's your invitation right there. They're letting you know they want to talk about it. But otherwise, you don't ever mention it. You can really traumatize someone.
With the percentages being so high of who has been victimized, it really behooves all of us to have antenna for this.
So true, Ardell.
Virtually for the majority.
Yeah.
And be surprised at nothing, and hopefully shocked at nothing.
Right.
Just be prepared to support.
What a good point. Just to be ready and just know that that if you go into some kind of, as so many of my students have, some sort of practice, you might think you're there to talk about their eyes, like Nancy, or their health or something, and all of a sudden this is what they want to talk about. Be prepared. Prepare yourself. I would suggest that there's some really good books in the field. My book, Truth Heals, isn't a bad one, but I'm seeing Eve over here saying she has a lot of experience. Eve, we'd love to hear from you. If I could call on you and bring you up and get your point of view, I would like to. Maybe Tiffany can see Eve and bring her up. There she is. Hey, Eve, tell us about your thoughts on this. You're muted. Hold on. Hold on. There you are. Good to see you. And
glad to see you. Thank you for taking my call, my input.
No, I'd love to hear your input.
I worked with some people with history of sexual abuse, some of them during the childhood and teen years.
Mhm.
I had some personal history with this. It was molestation, so nothing so heavy as so many of others panelists here had.
Well, hold on. Let me respond to that, because I want to assure you that there is no like light kind of abuse.
Yeah, that's true.
Each individual's response is unique.
Yeah.
The timing and the setting and the age and everything is unique. And what to one person might seem like just a, a light pat, or to someone else will be perceived as very invasive. So yeah, don't downgrade your own experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a common tendency of protecting the attacker, the abuser, and even saving it. And as so many of us, we have such a sturdy, let's say, moral Christian of being victims and taking the pain without speaking about it. We bear the guilt for decades without being able to heal. Once we release this tendency of protecting or saving the perpetrator, we are almost instantaneously able to release the guilt. But
very interesting point of view. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and EFT works wonders in this situation, at least with me and my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the guilt is going to hunt the victim. It doesn't stop and it doesn't tire. So
yeah, really interesting point, Eva. Let me just comment on it. She's talking about, and you saw it so clearly with these two young men, their need to protect Michael. Yes. And I can assure you, I felt this so strongly myself. And let's just focus on characterology for a moment again, because which characterology asks us to protect them? The oral characterology, right? So this is a really interesting point. You might, if you get clients or if you're just reading or viewing something and you see a perpetrator, ask yourself, are they acting oral? Because during their perpetrator period, they're psychopathic, of course. That's the invasive, I'll get my way kind of energy. But then the cover-up part is all, oral, take care of me, protect me, don't tell anyone, we'll both be hurt, oh, please help me. It's, oh, please help me energy. Eva's right. Yeah, thank you so much for contributing.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, very good to see you. Yeah, that's such a key thing, and I saw it much more clearly myself when watching this documentary. This documentary is a great teaching. It's a great teaching for the world, for all societies. Again, this is endemic around the world. This issue, it is not like localized to the U.S. or localized to celebrity. It's everywhere. It's in every family. It's in every township. It's everywhere. And Cindy, I see Cindy joined us. Cindy,
Hi.
What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm a survivor.
Good for you. Congrats.
And I'm actually working. I'm working constantly on guilt and shame. Mm-hmm. And I admit that when I first watched about Michael Jackson, I almost caught myself being a protector as well. I just didn't want to believe that it was true, right? I mean, he was so full of light. How can he be responsible for this? But then you go back and you look, and yeah, there's a lot of triggers there. For me, I confronted one time my mother, and she said something similar to what your mother said, and just told me to forget it. It never happened, just forget it. Well, that was sort of validation for me. I still have abusers that are alive, so I have to be a little bit careful. I haven't gone public with my truth yet, but I am a survivor and I am on the path, I believe, to recovery and forgiveness. And I have several clients who have also experienced sexual abuse, and I practice all the things that we've covered today with them. And we're constantly going through the guilt and the shame. It's always there. So You know, I mean,
really, really excellent points that you're raising, Cindy, and thank you so much for coming and sharing. And very brave of you, by the way, because I remember how hard it was originally.
Yeah.
No, it takes a lot.
It's not easy.
I did it in little tiny baby steps. First, I, told my mother that I'd been abused. I didn't say who, Then when I finally told her who, her first response was, and I actually, if you can believe this, I taped the conversation. Not so much probably to hear what she said as to hear what I said, because I knew I was going to be out of body.
Yes.
And so I taped the conversation, and I still carry this tape around. The thing you can imagine is in one of those little tape recorders back from a million years ago, And every time I move, change homes or something, there it is in storage, the little tape with the little tiny cassette inside. Oh my God. Who knows if it would even play. But her instant response was, oh, do you think he did it? Do you think your father did that to your sister? Instant response. And I said, well, I don't know. She was a lot older than me, 10 years older. Yeah. The next day, though, the knife fell. She recovered overnight and announced to the family that I'd had a nervous breakdown and was running around making accusations, and that I was promptly disowned and not invited back. You kind of have to prepare yourself. It can be it can be a little traumatic. But your point about feeling sorry for Michael and the perpetrator, that is so instinctive. See, was my reaction to Michael Jackson when he was on trial in 2002. I was like, oh, it's just like my dad, So you don't even know that you're doing that. You don't know you're projecting that incredible empathy you were taught by your perpetrator onto another perpetrator, but that is exactly what you're doing. You're whitewashing him. So for those of you who are still holding true to, Michael Jackson's an angel and whatnot, I would urge you to look at your own childhood pretty hard, because you might be doing that exact kind of projection is what it is. So we project our feelings about one person onto another. The common psychological aberration. We all do it. I'd be very curious if that isn't the dynamic that's going on. Almost out of time. Does anybody else have a comment here? Anybody that's here on the screen? I see. I see Karen made a remark about a collective guilt over here in the chat window. I'm not sure that's where the source of the anger is, Karen. You're thinking because we all ignored it, the obvious signs of.
I think the people that are.
We all did.
Yeah, I think the people that are the most angry and are kind of shooting back at you are the people that it's kind of our own shadow, like you're saying, like they don't want to see it. They don't want to look into that. And so it's easier.
Yeah, there's another energy going on here too. It's wanting to put up on a pedestal a guru or a celebrity, or, we have this need, right, to put on a pedestal some person we almost make godlike, and then to have him attacked, and we discover he's not only just human, but really pretty much at the bottom, because this behavior is beyond reprehensible, right? To hurt little children is like the scum, the bottom of the scum.
Yeah.
It's really hard for people who had him on a pedestal. And so my counseling in that regard would be stop putting people on pedestals. Yeah, all people. People don't belong on pedestals. They're humans just like you, with frailties just like you. They aren't necessarily better than you, by the way. In fact, they might be worse. So it's a human tendency to want to glorify an individual and give them, godlike powers. And we're not 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old where that's normal. That's normal tendency, and that's what happened to these little boys. That's exactly what happened to them. They put Michael Jackson on a pedestal. I just think it's the most teachable thing I've seen in ages. So I really want to urge you, if you haven't seen it and you're here today, take time and watch it. Bring a couple of vats of popcorn, though. It's long, but you won't be able to stop watching it. It's riveting. Or in Kleenex, Karen says, and I want to thank my panel for all being so brave to take the time and and come and be seen and be heard on this pretty hot topic. On a lighter note, I want to encourage everybody to watch, because I hadn't bothered to sign up for HBO. Is it HBO Now? HBO Go? I never could get it straight. Anyway, I had to sign up for it, right, to see the documentary when I wanted to see it and not like try to find it on HBO. And that just opened a vast storehouse of great material. And I want to encourage you to watch Jane Fonda's documentary. Now, I've always said that I consider her kind of a feminine icon, despite the fact that, you know, she made a couple of maybe not the best marriage choices. But hey, it's her life, right? And I've always been a fan of hers and follow her work and follow her activism and think pretty highly of her. The documentary is really watchable. It's really good. I just finished it. It's a kind of a clean, a breath of fresh air after watching, what's it called? Leaving Neverland? After leaving Neverland. So, you know, for this weekend, if you're looking for some entertainment and yet to learn about what a woman can do who sets her mind to it, you might try it, because she is pretty amazing. She is really pretty amazing, and it's very well done. It's very well done.
Do you know the title?
Just put Jane Fonda in the window. It's probably, if I found it on HBO Go, it's probably also on Hulu, or, you know, I don't think you can find the stuff on Netflix. Where did you all see Watching Neverland or Leaving Neverland? Where'd you guys see it?
HBO Go.
Yeah, HBO Now.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. Once I signed up for it, I saw the Jane Fonda thing.
And you can search documentary for Jane Fonda. I think it might.
Might pop right up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been out a while. It's not.
Yeah.
At least a month, if not
I
longer.
saw it as well. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's really good. All right, great being with you all. Thank you for coming. And we'll find another hot topic for next time. Everybody take care.
See you later.
Bye-bye.